So here we are in part 2. And what we will do is we will ask each of the themes from part 1, of which there were 4, for each to spend a few minutes presenting from a slide that they've created. And Larry, let me know when there's something to bring along. And then we'll have open conversation after 4 times 10. And in that conversation, we would like feedback on those individual themes. We might change that. Sorry, let me be more clear. 10 minutes per theme, a short presentation and commentary on each theme, and then open conversation. And before we end, I want to make sure that this invitation for new UMacy conversations to be very clear. This initiative is meant to be a network. It's not meant to be one idea or another or centralized in the ASC, the American Society for Cybernetics. We want it to be a broad set of individual eddies or hubs or groups that have initiatives of their own and interests of their own. And I know a number of people who are in this meeting have interests beyond the AI particular focus that some of the themes are about today. And we'll have final comments and to mention where we expect to go in the future. So this is the plan. And in the next 20 minutes, we would do again, each theme 10 minutes each. These were the themes as we began today. Just take a quick look, very quick look, if you don't mind to be quick. These were the ones that came from a survey that we created, and we selected among them the most interesting according to the survey. And these were the bases of today's conversations in 4 separate breakout rooms. This is theme 1/4. I would ask Eve, I think you're the moderator of 1/4, if I'm correct, if you could pick this up and speak to it, and I'll start a timer for 10 minutes, which you can divide.
Okay, well, me and Kate.
Great. Okay, that would be great.
So Kate, did you want me to take the lead in this and then you can chime in?
Yes, please. You take the lead. Thanks, Eve.
So these were just some of the key points that emerged from our discussion. We wanted to emphasize the ability of the arts to facilitate learning and support flexibility of organized systems. And out of that emerged the point of the need to integrate arts in early education, including, very early preschool, kindergarten. And then the question of what is a creative AI? How do we embody that? And the recognition of the dissection of education into analogic versus digital frameworks is itself a problem. And then the question about a more integrative forms of education, and how does that in turn play into designing systems in the world, and support designing more flexible, creative, and human systems in the world. The point was brought up about reimagining what has gone before as something that the arts facilitate, that seems to be lost in our current AI systems. And for opportunities, how do we build on using the arts to cut through problems and build a global response, as we saw, for instance, with Live Aid? So that shows that communication technology at least can be in to endeavors that benefit the global community of humans as a whole, and that kind of technology can go as sharing of music shows. It can go beyond a structured word format, and create a powerful alternative forms for learning and sharing. And thinking about that and how the world has changed for us, that point about that we've invented the environment of human life, life for ourselves, also for other species. And there's been a lot of generational change The example was brought up of, talking about Superman changing in a phone booth and current younger generations saying, what's a phone booth? So we've got those barriers now sometimes of talking across generations, and the ability of the arts and integrative education to bring in new metaphors. That's something we wanted to flag.
Beautiful discussion, especially from those who were not, well, those in the room who want to add any clarification, who participated in the theme, and then commentary from others to contribute.
Well, shall I just jump in? So to
Yep,
get,
please.
okay. So just a couple of things that also we were talking about this, the problem, and this was sort of perhaps our argument for the relationship, part of the argument for the relationship of themes 1 and 4, this idea that we can't just dissect education within, we can't create dissections just within an educational system, but we can't dissect education and then, a professional workforce, so that if we make these adjustments, if we consider these adjustments to the structures of education, then we also have to think about how that relates beyond those particular domains. And so some of the, and maybe Fred and Damien and others in the group, we were talking about this idea of intervention and reciprocity. I think in addition to all of the things that Eve summarized, there's room for other discussion there with those ideas of this exchange between different domains, education, and then what is beyond it.
I think that summarized that really well, Kate. I think what was really interesting was how we were talking about the relationship of balance and the opportunity of interaction, and how you engage that, not just on a local level, but to cross borders, so that the interaction doesn't just become of a particular group, but is spread, and hence the relationship to that incredible kind of almost world-changing communication process that came about with Live Aid. And obviously education is such a wonderful space that isn't just actually about our youth, it's about for all of us, which is creative and develops new relationships, new ways of thinking that I'm sure none of us have yet maybe imagined. And that potential is, I think, phenomenal.
Beautiful. Any other commentary on this theme?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Kate and Eve and Damien. I just add something in that. Another thing that we touched on was just in merging groups 1 and 4. And I had pointed out that I was actually in neither of the groups the first round. I was in the sustainability group. That things that were coming into focus a little bit more, at the same time holding on to the variety that we need, was just the idea that the way that we see our worlds in terms of how we bring disciplines into education was also showing up in everything else that we do. And that AI was reinforcing that in terms of how we even think of logics of menus, for example, and how to bring creativity into that process. And music, with Kate's example, afforded such a wonderful world in, and thinking about different metaphors through music, for example.
We have some hands up. Michael?
Yeah.
Michael Hall?
In my view, art is perhaps not the best way of looking at problems or solving problems. Maybe it's a way of looking and identifying problems. So if you look at traditional arts education, it is it's about serendipity, it's about inquiry, it's always personal, yeah, and often self-centered, I would say. And so what makes an artistic approach distinctly artistic? Is it the playfulness? Is it the open-endedness? There are many different ways of doing art. Is it a mastery of something? For me, always, or sometimes I supervise art students as well. And I realize, or I've come to realize, okay, they work really, really hard, at least as hard as designers do. But art is a way of asking questions, whereas designing is a way of solving problems, of giving answers. Simply put, really coarsely, yeah. So, well.
Thank you, Michael. Dr. Gopal?
Much. Just wondering if it is reimagining of what has gone before, lost through AI or repackaged through AI. We may not be losing much in AI. We are just repackaging.
That's a
A
beautifully
hunch
posed
that I
question.
have with other sciences as well.
Are we
They were all
doing
there.
are we doing the new, or are we repackaging the old? Thank you.
I want to say something about art and the nature of art, and its essentially communal nature. Like when you're writing a play, plays aren't written, they're rewritten. As a playwright, I have to talk to the director. The skill that a director has is being able to talk to actors. The actors have to talk to the audience, and the audience has reactions. So as a company, we have to look at the audience and see what the audience is doing. And that changes what we can do as a company, because although every audience is different, there are some things that work and some things that don't work. So it's a communal project. And a play is play. Okay, it is play. One of the fundamental biological characteristics is play. And in art, we're doing that play. And without play, you don't have the humor. Just saying.
Thank you, Robert. We've come to the end of the 10 minutes for theme 1-4. Let's move along. And then there'll be ample time for more conversation. Theme 2, sustainability.
Might I suggest we ask about group 1 as it directly relates to group 1/4?
Yes.
We didn't have a proposal directly from group 1, but we can.
That may have been me.
So is there a slide for group 1 alone?
It's slide 27.
I beg your pardon. Let me find that.
Sorry,
slide
that's on
27. I see. Okay, great. Also, there's a peculiarity here. Give me just a minute. I have to stop sharing. Let me see if I can do this quickly enough as to not be awkward. Yeah, for some reason, it's not letting me add slides to the real-time deck, and I don't know why. So I will share from this one instead. It's all quite mysterious. Theme 1, session 2, where are you? This might be the right one.
Yes, that's the right one. Yes, thanks.
Good, give me a moment. Good, so please address this. We'll start the timer.
So in our conversation started with education is fragmented, our worldview is fragmented. As a result, how can cybernetics help approach this problem and empower us. So this is very small. I have to switch to the other slide. So what would make such an approach distinctly cybernetic? This was the last session, bringing in a systems view. You only see what you know, bottom up, it's iterative. You have a long-term perspective when you go through different iterations. You involve feedback, democratic, taking everyone into account, involving curiosity, humility, listening and understanding, making room for learning, error and course correction. So then in our conversation, we looked at examples where people already in practice are trying to practice this, maybe not through a cybernetics lens, but through a system thinking approach of integrating knowledge and connecting it to heritage or traditions. So this leading to a more systematic, open, connected, humble mindset of a lifelong learner. And the examples were Fritjof Capras and Alice Waters' integrated teaching in the SF Bay area with the school gardens, where the math teacher and the arts teacher and the biology teacher devise a lecture about Mendel's law of inheritance, and then they go out into the school garden and the children learn drawing and painting those beans, and then they learn something about Mendel's law, and then they apply math, for example. A similar approach, and this is very much connected to what Heinz von Förster was thinking and doing in his higher education in the 1970s. Neil Postman, teaching as a subversive activity, Paulo Freire, all these educators, and even Dewey wrote about the importance of feedback and reflection. Then we have in Hawaii schools that tried to do this already since the 1980s. The Kamehameha schools, Kohala Center also in Hawaii. Then you have Schumacher College, but this is for older students in Devon in the UK. And we ended up with the kind of question, how may cybernetics contribute then to changing education in general, to lead to this integrated way of knowing and getting away from this fragmented education and a fragmented worldview, resulting in a more integrated worldview? So changing general education, changing design education, and perhaps changing higher education in general. So how can we bring this mindset into it in order to integrate disciplines and integrate knowing? So, any questions or comments from the others?
Eve, I think this would be useful if you could explain what you mean by, with your comment, that you have an issue with this idea of can cybernetics contribute?
I didn't mean to hit return, then I put the rest of it in the chat box.
Okay.
I mean, I think we have to, yeah, so. I mean,
It's a
I
question of empowering. Okay, yeah.
No, I just, rather say, I think we have to be wary of, reifying cybernetics as a thing. I mean, we're talking about the cybernetics community, and then you can say, well, which people might want to participate, or you can say cybernetic ideas, and then you say which ideas. Yeah, cybernetic concepts, then we can go on to specify, which concepts.
Yeah, so the empower was the choice. Before there stood, how can cybernetics help to change this?
Right, but do we mean, the cybernetics community, then we figure out who, or, right? I mean, it's not a thing, right? It's a group of people that are talking to each other.
It's a way of thinking, and maybe it's teaching a way of thinking.
Yeah, then you can say cybernetics concepts, and then we can go on to discuss which concepts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is Fred, I have a comment, and I probably should be raising my hand, I'm sorry. But
You're good.
I'm fascinated by your bringing the Kohala Center in, because I mean, one of the things that stands out for me in their work is, given the choice of thinking about it, in a way, it's a science center, and thinking about how to build it. And then they decided that the entire island, the entire big island, was their science center, and how that invited other people in. But the origins of that were expressly cybernetic in terms of rethinking boundaries of where we learn, where we play. So Michael, that's a great example to bring in.
And they're just doing it for a very long time, yeah?
Yeah.
And they never use the term cybernetics.
Actually, we have a proposal. Yeah, we can talk offline about this. A proposal that did use it that didn't get funded. Yeah.
Other commentary about theme one, the pure theme one, as opposed to the combined 1 and 4.
I don't know if Ben wants to elaborate on what he said, because a few people seem to be curious about that, problematizing solutions.
Ben?
Hi, I won't speak very long, so I'm not feeling so well today. Yeah, so it was really on the last slide when there was a bit of a discussion about art and problem solving, and it seemed to me that these, especially in the context of AI or automation and optimization, things like this, these are things that actually come out of a problem solving mindset. And I don't think we kind of, a lot of the problems we have are about solutions, right? So one of the things art does is problematize. You could think of it as a problematization of solutions, and maybe that's an appropriate thing for the, if you think about what AI is doing, like that, actually we need to have ways in which the ways it's solving problems, we need to think about how that becomes problematized.
Thank you, Ben. We might move on and then open the floor for more conversation a bit later. Let's see now, I have to track back. I have to break out of this because that's the way these things work. That's the real-time deck. I'm going to come back to this deck. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. Next is the one on sustainability, theme 2.
That's correct. That's my group.
Hey, Michael.
So we had a really great conversation that kind of began with raising the question, what is sustainability? Who gets to define that? What's being sustained? And is sustainability static or dynamic? And so we expanded the initial theme to now say automated and interactive systems should be designed for environmental sustainability. And let's see. I think somebody might need to mute themselves. And the long-term viability of all we cherish as human beings. Here we draw upon precedents in cybernetics to build a model for conversations around sustainability, moving towards metastructures which facilitate the emergence of sustainability concepts and imaginaries. From my perspective, it seems like we believe that conversations about sustainability are critical to the emergence of sustainability concepts and imaginaries. And so we're thinking about things like metastructures for conversations about sustainability, so that we don't end up trying to define it ourselves, a small group of people, but making sure that there's a way that many voices can be included and that this can be an ongoing and perhaps adaptive conversation. So these questions that you see below are maybe facets of these conversations that need to happen, or perhaps even prompts for a larger conversation about what we mean by sustainability. Anybody else from my group who wants to chime in, please feel free to now.
As others consider comments, this is a huge opening of opportunity here in your group, Michael. It's divergent in the best sense, and it raises very, very large and important open-ended questions. As we consider what will come next, maybe I can use this opening that I've made to talk about how we'd like to end and then continue after the end of part 2. The invitation is to take these themes as individual, as I said before, energy sources. And in particular, there's an opportunity in the upcoming RSD 10 conference, where we have a session of 90 minutes on the 2nd of November to go further. Certainly, we would like to report out some syntheses of what we've come to after this meeting. Again, the idea is that each New Macy meeting is somehow building on the prior one and perhaps converging on particular topics. So the challenge here, I think, Michael, is there a way to get a grip on this and to narrow it toward something concrete and actionable? This would be my encouragement.
Well, actually it can, I think, because if you're enlarging the understanding of sustainability, there are several questions that need to be opened. And those are standard questions, for instance, stakeholders, the holders of system of sustainable. And that's the next question, I think, is particularly interesting, because we're talking not only about non-human views of sustainability. Now, that really redefines the understanding of what is sustainable, and also it does change time. So it's not something found from the beginning. And yes, particularly the comment on what cybernetics could do is basically models, tool sets that could open the discussion on this particular issue. And this is something which is actually achievable.
Igor, we're losing you a little bit in audio. I think we got most of that, but not all of it. I don't know whether some comments in the chat appeal to you to add, but also Deborah Forster has added a few as well about resilience.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Igor. And please feel free to add text to the chat. Any other comments on theme 2? We have 2 more to go.
Yeah, Paul.
Larry, please.
Yeah, it occurs to me as I'm looking at this slide and listening, there's a body of knowledge called donut economics.
Mm-hmm.
Donut economics is an attempt to find a balance worldwide between the resources needed for basic human needs and the long-term sustainability of those resources. It would seem to me that if we were to take on donut economics, it would require some form of machine, some form of AI device or programming in order to continually monitor those aspects of this particular idea about world sustainability. Now, my reading is that what they've done is represents current best knowledge. Of course, that can change over time, and such a system would be there in order to make those changes as they arose.
Thank you, Larry. Any last comments on theme 2? Shall we move to theme number 3? Larry, I think this is back to you if you care to be the spokesperson for this.
Yeah, over the break, I tried to capture some of what our group was discussing. It was and I apologize for not being able to synthesize any better than this. This is more my reaction to the group discussion. But it starts that if we want machines to facilitate human well-being, which I'm assuming here includes our interactions, our conversations that we have with each other in language, and if we know machines cannot themselves generate conversation, yet if we want machines that are conversation friendly, for lack of a better term, how might we think about and proceed to imagine such machines? What would be their function in the world? What would be minimal requirements for design? How do we as social beings have to change? We have to change in order to realize the value of such machines. And where, if at all, does biology enter this enterprise? And I added that because for a couple of reasons. It came up in the discussion, Deborah in particular, I wanted this as a theme. But we also perhaps should remember that one of the originating laboratories of cybernetics was called the Biological Computer Laboratory. Is there still relevance to that title?
Discussion. Others not in the session who would like to add? Others who were in the session who would like to add?
Well, I'll add a quick comment. Since I spent some time at the Biological Computer Laboratory, I often puzzled over the title. I didn't know that there are any biological computers around, but of course, human beings are biological computers if you think of the nervous system as a computational device. Heinz von Forster was very much interested in cognition, doing neurophysiological experiments on cognition. The Maturana article, What the Frog's Eye Tells the Frog's Brain, was certainly an example, and other similar examples of work were done at BCL. So it defines computation very broadly to include all communication as a computational activity, like what am I doing? What am I trying to achieve? What is an appropriate strategy? That can all be defined as computing. And if you think of all cognitive human activity as computing, and that's what you want to understand is cognition, then you have the Biological Computer Laboratory.
Stuart, I always felt that calling it a biological computer lab was exactly the encompassment that Heinz von Forster wanted. He wanted it broad and to be cybernetic in that sense, right? In the broadest possible way. And his proposals to the NSF and others, which may not have succeeded, were always of a kind that were difficult for those in the digital realm to comprehend. Is that too harsh?
No. They see computers as electronics and digital, and that was not Heinz's idea.
Right. And this to me is a wonderful reminder and resonant to the ideas that some of the New Macy conversations have gone toward, which is to find analogical frameworks, analogic interactive frameworks, in contrast to the digital interaction frameworks that the industry is obsessed by, and the smaller, cheaper, faster digital von Neumann machines has imposed on all of us, for better or worse. Havar, do you have a remark? And then Deborah.
Yes, I would like to continue with what Stuart was saying. In answer to the questions, if we are talking about machines as supporting individuals, then apparently there is something in individuals that goes beyond the machine. So the answer to most of the questions in this slide is actually every combination of a human being and the machine such that the human being is in control is what we want to actually achieve. So that's my answer to the questions. That's my proposed answer to the question.
Havar, I want to ask you one thing about that. You used the word control. You said the
Yes.
humans were in control.
Yes.
How are you then limiting the agency of the machine?
Well, the word control is obviously laden. So if I would say what we are talking about, suppose I have, I use a bicycle. Bicycle is a machine. If I control the bicycle will actually function in any way it is possible, but at the same time, the combination of the bicycle and me is able to do a lot of things, like going somewhere, but also creating a flying machine, creating maybe an electricity generator, and so on. So that's what I mean by control.
Thank you. Of course, Steve Jobs famously called a computer a bicycle for the mind.
Yeah.
But Deborah, please.
Let me just make sure that okay. So just to respond to the last comment, today in robotics and AI and machine learning, they talk a lot about shared control. And if you think about shared control also in biological systems, maybe the best example is the kind of shared control that we have, let's say in walking, where it's much lower in the nervous system that generates the patterns of gait, but the intentionality of where to go is a more cortical. So there's, whenever you get up and you say, I'm going to get a cup of coffee, there's shared control that happens between parts of your nervous system. So I think that generalizes well to it. And I think a lot of when I think about the moment of the first Macy's, it was this moment of humility, of the brave new world. What do we do after we just went through 2 world wars, especially World War II, and this kind of openness to reconsider boundaries between biology and machines. That I think that's the spirit that we have to conjure up again today, and it's already getting performed. So if you think there are today autonomous vehicles that navigate through city intersections, if that's not a conversation, a machine conversation, then I don't know what is. Just the other day, WeRide, which is a Chinese robotaxi, showed a safety driver who fell asleep while he's in the car and the implications of that. But he fell asleep largely because that autonomous vehicle is reading bicycles and people and cars and making a decision of how to get through an intersection. And a lot of the robots, I mean, even take your Roomba cleaning your living room. I mean, I think we're already performing machine conversations embedded in our world in a way that helps us kind of maybe understand that the boundaries are already are porous, and how do we then develop and almost like get our conceptual frameworks and our meta conversations to match what we're actually already enacting in the world.
I love the comment, Deborah. I would add, and others here who know about Pask's work would add, I think, that conversation, as you just said, it is more contained than the kinds of conversations in which there's an exploration of possibility and a collaboration about intention, rather than simply an execution of the agreed intention, which is to get through. So in the slide like this, that would be something I would add. The question is, what's the boundary of conversation that we're talking about? And what is the scope of intention? But I appreciate so much what you're bringing in about the nature of today's interactions between humans and machines, in which it's such a rich interaction of conversation. Excuse me, that's not the word I meant to use. Such a rich interaction of communication, such that we're pushing the boundaries of what I'm always interested in talking about, which is the emergence of new possibility through co-design, or what Negroponte had intended but never achieved in the architecture machine, which is a conversation with a machine about designing rather than about negotiating or cooperating. Thank you for that. We may want to move to theme 4 and then open it up to the broader conversation. And we can come back in that point. If there's no one who wishes to speak now, shall we move to theme 4? And there are some wonderful comments in the chat that I would mention. Is there really a theme 4? Have I lost track? Yes, of course. The integrative approach is. The independent theme 4, of course. Sorry.
Yes.
Please.
So the question, as we started, was about increasingly intrusive AI needs to be countered by an approach to system theory and practice that integrates design and the arts. And in our discussions, there were numerous questions whether, for example, increasingly intrusive AI is strong enough, whether we need to actually better define what we mean when we speak about AI, the soul. Is it the soulless golem? And should we actually speak of to balance rather than of a countering, of a balancing rather than a countering? But then again, if that AI that we talk about is a monster, then probably we shouldn't consider balancing, because the monster cannot be balanced. And should we possibly, in this context, consider the difference between design and art? So then the original question continued, saying cybernetics is such an approach, encouraging improvisation and creativity, drawing on multiple levels of consciousness and connection, and involving both humans and the world of which we are part. What are the precedents or models one could build on? How could one develop this further? And then there were numerous comments. We have to try to summarize some of these. We need examples for how to make AI more transparent. And in regards to the idea of a countering or balancing, which this may be a counterbalancing, we could consider displacement, and displacement as something that is a principle pointing to what is intrinsic to the human, social, and political. And the ethics, creativity, intuitivity, the unexpected, and also expecting the unexpected of biological systems needs to be considered also when we think design systems, including institutions. Art and design allow for unique opportunities to provide access. Now the questions about this term again, access, through intervention and its capacity to reveal, disclose. This points back to the question of transparency. What is that? Reveal, disclose what is hidden. to us humans who are not AI or autonomous systems. And then again, a comment that we need to think more about what that is, the other, the soulless, the golem. And I would like to invite others who were in these sessions to add to this. And I'm sure there are many more comments. Anyone?
Others in the theme 4 conversation first, and then comments about them.
I just wanted to add that the other, a different sense of what that other refers to in the conversation had to do with what is other than AI, or what do we share widely, publicly, globally anymore that we have in common that is not within the expanse of AI. So the other is not necessarily referring to golem or the soulless. It's potentially just the opposite of that as well.
Mm. Yeah, that definitely needs more clarification. Anyone else, maybe? I mean, we had some more thoughts about this. For me, the question is also about to which extent allows cybernetics or allows cybernetic concepts, if I follow Yves' comment from earlier on, to actually discuss activities of revealing, disclosing. These are technically, I would say, these are terms that would also appear in the discourse by Martin Heidegger on art, very, I mean, it's kind of the center of that kind of discourse. So for me, the question is that similar to what cybernetics does, or is that totally different? Or should we maybe make that difference because Heidegger really stayed totally in the theoretical realm, didn't make that step into practice, into what notably he was not able to access poetry as such. And is that maybe the opportunity of cybernetics?
Other commentary specific to theme 4. Okay, let me propose to open the conversation more generally, but with an intention toward the concrete. So I think we can agree, I certainly feel like we've had some marvelous exchanges. Larry might say they are not conversations. I disagree. Again, you know, where's the boundary of that thing called conversation? So they're not Larry Richards conversations, but there's some sort of conversation, I think. Others should say where they feel the boundary lies. My push, and I use that word consciously, is toward the concrete. Can we make these 4 or now 5 individual slides specific toward action? So what have we learned And can we bring that to further activities under the Numesi Initiative umbrella? Not the best metaphor. The idea that we need to bring the variety of transdisciplinary, transglobal, and transgenerational conversations to bear on the situations that we see, to mitigate the problems that we see in those situations. How do we go from here? How do we become more specific? In particular, there's the RSD conference on November 2nd, where we have another opportunity to come back and to create some kind of activity, perhaps like this, perhaps hopefully improved. As each experiment moves ahead, each improv becomes more refined. What can we do? Not just what can we talk about. Let me open it up to that. And I don't mind long silences, so I'll just wait.
Everyone is testing your patience now, Paul.
I would love to hear more about the biology lab, especially Stuart's comment about, what people see machines as technology or as ships and not what Heinz von Forst intended. It seems there's a lot to unpack, which I don't know about. So I'd be curious to hear more about that topic. It seems to be very related to what we're discussing here, of using machines, of using technology in different ways, not to just making calculations.
Well, I'll try to add some comments here, and those who know about BCL can interrupt me whenever you want. Some of the early work that was done at BCL was the creation of analog computers. Now, the younger people among us may not know what an analog computer was or looked like, but before there were digital computers, there were analog computers. These were electronic wired devices that people solved problems, certain kinds of problems. And then the world moved toward digital computers. So that was one kind of activity that was going on. But Heinz von Forster was also involved in dance and computer music and many other things. So he was really interested in cognition and understanding cognition. And he viewed neurophysiological research as a way of understanding how the brain functioned. So if you keep that in mind, that one of his approaches was to study neurophysiology, and he had a cross appointment to the Department of Biophysics, even though he was located in the Department of Electrical Engineering. So that may be some useful background. Michael Hull.
I'm not really sure I can add anything to that.
So I sense there was a gap from the whole thinking or what we can get from the analog computing to kind of was broken, and then we move into the digital.
No, I don't think there was a gap. It was a natural evolution. The world moved from digital to analog computers. But as I was saying, Heinz was a person with very broad interests as a result of his upbringing in Vienna, and his family was very much involved in the arts, and from architecture to music and so forth. But the last project that was done at BCL, I hope many of you have seen, it's this big, thick book, Cybernetics of Cybernetics. And it's a collection of articles. And it was organized somewhat like a website. You might think of a website. This was before there were websites. This is 1974. So they punched holes in the paper and you could stick in a knitting needle and jump to some other page in this book. So they were experimenting in a lot of different ways. And often they were using technology that didn't exist at the time, which is what a university laboratory is supposed to do. So people who were associated with BCL always had very pleasant memories of BCL because Heinz ran the thing sort of like a master of ceremonies. If you've ever been to a circus and you have a 3-ring circus with all kinds of performances going on, and Heinz was almost, well, he is orchestrating all this and suggest, well, do some more of this, or why don't you people work together, and so forth. And so it's a very exciting place to be, but it was hard for other engineering faculty members to understand what he was doing. And they had a tendency to view him as a charlatan or not serious or something else.
A magician.
Magician, exactly. He started as a magician as a child. He and a friend made some money doing magical performances. And Heinz's papers, presentations were often like a magician's performance, where he sets you off going in one particular direction and then asks you a question, and then he loops back around the other way. And the result is a humorous insight when you saw things that you'd never seen before. And that's just the way Heinz operated. So he was a fascinating person to get to know and to be associated with.
Dr. Gopal, you've been patient.
Thank you very much for this nice discussion on the biological computing. Ehud Shapiro from Weizmann Institute, he has built a biological computer. Your comments on that?
I'm sorry, I missed the name.
Ehud Shapiro, Weizmann Institute, Israel. He has come up with a biological computer, and your opinion about what he called biological computer?
I'm not familiar. If you could put the name and any references in the chat, I'd love to follow up on that.
I am doing that. Sorry, I will do that. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Ehud Shapiro. Ehud Shapiro.
Excuse me, is that the bacteria-based machine that was claimed to be able to perform calculations?
Yes.
Using successive generations of microorganisms, essentially?
I met him several years back, 2000, when we did a conference on nanocomputing. And this is what is his
Great. Thank you. And also Deborah for the link to the Wikipedia page. Deborah, are you familiar with this work?
A little bit. There are a lot of people in the Weizmann Institute that are trying all kinds of things, and now they have also chips that are actually using kind of lab-grown DNA molecules and trying to consider computation around that. I also mentioned in the chat Robert Rosen. He was a mathematical biologist. One of his books, Life Itself, he wrote about anticipatory machines and biological relational ways of considering machines that kind of break down this kind of dichotomy that we kind of, or this boundary that we're kind of considering between biological and human-made machines. And I think that's useful because the notion of mechanism was so central to how biology kind of developed a way of explaining how things work. I think, you know, the cybernetic moment was just one moment in a continuum in which we saw our best understanding of ourselves in the current technology or machines that we built. So if it was like the watchmaker at some point, and then, right, so the cybernetic moment is a moment where the machines can actually also do feedback. I think we're in a revisit. I think what we need today desperately is to say, okay, what are human-made machines today? And then revisit the kind of relationship with what we want to say about ourselves. And I think in a way, we are what the first Macy Foundation series kind of dreamed of to be in, is in a situation where you could say, oh, I want a machine that could handle, like I said before, a car going through an intersection. What would I have to bring together? What elements would I have to bring together for that conversation to be successful? And mind you, the safety issues of getting through an intersections have been largely resolved. What car companies that are working with autonomous vehicles are worried now is how to make that conversation more fluid and more acceptable to humans. But the issue of being safer than a human driver would be, all that kind of thing. So those are already, we have good examples of that on the road, both in trucks and cars. But is it a good conversation? Is it fluid? Do the people come out of it feeling that, you know, the car really understood them or not? That's kind of more of where we are. And like a lot of biological mechanisms, we're limited in the area in which they kind of work and can be effective. So there is this kind of, the idea of integration also has to include in it some kind of heterogeneity, right? That we say, okay, you guys in the digestive system, just work on that. Your enzymes don't go across, you know, these whatever acids don't go up to the mouth area to burn the tissue. Stay in the stomach, or, you know, we have all kinds of ways of exploring the way the boundaries of mechanisms play out in a way that helps whatever whole we want to imagine. So I think those are going to be substantial challenges to the type of people that want to engage in this kind of new Macy's, because a lot is changing, and we need the artists to play with it. We need all those elements to be in play.
Agreed. Thank you. We have a couple of hands, Fred and then Serena.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So my comment is more of a meta comment, and I'm sorry, Deborah, I really value what you were saying. This is going to be a little discontinuous, building on what you said. But it's just sort of looking at what we're doing, and we're in Zoom, which is a design space and has certain affordances. And there's a wonderful conversation about conversations going on in the chat. And there's a wonderful conversation about BCL and many other things going on here. And just thinking about Zoom as a design space, is it really affording the kinds of conversations we want to participate in, and how are we participating in them? Really thinking about conversation in the sense of con and versa turning with. What are we doing? And it's not meant as a criticism at all, because what we're doing we probably could not do and save face in a shared space. We'd be passing notes back and forth to each other behind the speaker's back. But at the same time, we are creating, in a sense, is it a richer conversation, or is it two separate conversations? And I'm just thinking about this in terms of the larger new Macy ideas that we're also grappling with in terms of AI, design spaces, conversations, and living with each other and being present for each other.
Thank you, Fred. Serena?
Yeah, so one of the main issues I see with AI are the biases that its makers perpetuate. Pretty much what we're seeing is that AI is pretty much built by white men for white men, which is causing a lot of issues with racism and sexism. And kind of ironically, in this moment, I think this is a group of people trying to change that AI, but it's still predominantly a group of white men. I'm not sure what sort of diversity initiatives have been taken already, but I would like to challenge the Cybernetics Society to include more diversity of worldviews and backgrounds. Otherwise, if we reflect on it in a second order cybernetics framework, perhaps we see that the same biases and assumptions and worldviews that are creating the problems are also the ones that are trying to fix the problem. And that's probably not the best approach to be taking. So we've established cybernetics to be transdisciplinary, but I would also think we would benefit from being transcultural as well.
Thank you very much, Serena. You echo what I was attempting to say earlier in talking about transglobal being inclusive and diverse.
Yeah,
And
I
also,
second that too.
Eve is very much concerned with that. Ben has raised that frequently. Others in the meeting have raised it. Clearly, we need to do more. And everything you can bring is very welcome. And we appreciate the comment very much. Thank you, Serena. Andre?
Yes. To the question of what can we do realistically, as in we, this group that's gathered here today, in my opinion, as scientists, the things that we can realistically do is bring awareness and bring clarity of these issues. And I'm not sure of anything beyond that. I hope you heard me. I think my internet's not great. So bringing awareness and clarity, this is something I can see as a couple of realistic goals that we can. In addition to that, is there I don't know, anything practical of the nature of, I don't know, could we, for example, design or create specifications for a new internet protocol, for example, or a new type of computing platform, or anything of this nature. And I thought about that, and my conclusion was, we don't have the necessary resources to do that. To me, it seems, we're restricted to trying to bring awareness and clarity to these issues. And I'd like to know what you think about this.
I'll speak first, if you don't mind, Andre. I agree and disagree. My disagreement is that I want to do more than just bring awareness and clarity. This is what I've been trying to emphasize in the Numacy. In the specific path down the pandemic of AI, and in a moment, and maybe I can ask Adler to do this sooner rather than later, there are many materials that we've been accumulating in regard to Numacy that are specific about the pandemic of AI. My goal there has been to say, we understand what's going on in the digital realm. Is there an analog realm where we can bring best practices, examples, design patterns, prototypes of the present and future, but also from the past, Gordon Pask being the obvious example, Ray Ascott's work and other students, Claudia Westermann included, and others. Can we bring to the world something to show, which perhaps comes under awareness and clarity, but for me is more active than that. And to bring those to the attention of designers, students, entrepreneurs, teachers, and purvey alternatives. That feels to me more like action. Maybe I'm deluding myself. But also, another point, I think others would also say this. We are not only scientists. I don't think of myself as a scientist in particular. There are many scientists in the society. But now there are also designers, artists, media people, critical theory people, and many others. And the diversity of that although not in the dimensions that Serena and many of us are concerned about, is still a different dimensionality that we want to continue to increase. That started with Glanville to some extent when he was president a few presidents ago. We want to increase that and to generate more. So I appreciate your comments very much. This would be where I would try to pull the conversation. Others should comment on Andre's comment.
I've seen this concern, and was part of our discussion since the beginning. And there are people actually from different regions, from different cultures, different generations. I've been in the discussions and in the previous New Macy meetings, and I wonder why they are not here. So maybe it's not just about including them, but also finding maybe there are different different types of meetings that appeal for different people, because it's not that we are excluding or they are not being part, but maybe the ways we interact need to be sort of rethought or expanded to include them in some way.
In my view, that's a response to Andre. To me, this sounds quite deterministic, yeah, as if technology was something that was happening to us. But in the end, what we want is a choice, yeah. And in this, I think I very much go along with Harari, yeah, that it's something that we have to discuss and control. So it's not something that is happening. This type of technology is not just happening to us. It's not deterministic, but actually something that we have to decide together. Yeah.
Control has been taken away from us in the past 30 years or so, or 40. Yeah, the technology of the 70s empowered its users. The technology of today empowers, I don't know, some large corporations, some incredibly rich people, you know, helping them get even richer and so on, and also governments. I think that the problems we're trying to wrestle with here are systemic, and they're not going to be solved unless we change the economic system, or unless major, you know, political changes occur. And realistically, the only actors that can hope to solve the kind of goals that we're trying to grapple with here are state actors. And that's why, you know, that explains my pessimism in regards to doing anything more than bring awareness and bring clarity, which I think, don't get me wrong, I think these goals are worthwhile and they're worth pursuing. I don't know that we should focus on actually trying to do something. I mean, what could we come up with? A new app? Well, but this app would have to function within the Google apps ecosystem or the Apple ecosystem and so on. And it would have to function on hardware, which is already under, yeah.
Andre,
Sorry.
I have great respect for where you are. And I want to distinguish what, again, I am focusing on in the New Macy Pandemic of AI Hub, EDDI piece. Ben, I'll come to you in a second. You've been patient. Thank you. And that is to not say that I can or we can take on Facebook, capitalism, the platform companies, but rather to say in a simple, modest way, we can offer alternatives, make alternatives, as TJ and others have been suggesting. What can we do beyond just talking? We can make things, we can promote alternatives of the analogic interactive variety root trace as an alternative to the digital. So I'm trying to stick to the knitting for which I feel I cannot be challenged in competence. It's just a choice of my own. Ben, thank you.
Yeah, I think it might be good to track back from that to some of the really amazing things that Claudia said, because I think and also maybe the more opportunistic thing I said in the chat earlier, the about problematizing solutions. If you think like, oh, how do we save this? It just how do we solve this? It just seems impossible. But there's also ways, like I think Deborah was saying, about how we kind of understand ourselves through the technologies that we have. And I think it's a quite reasonable thing to make things which let us re-understand, reveal or disclose things that could be quite impactful. So that would be a kind of different way to think about the things you make, right? The things you can make, things that have the purpose is not necessarily a kind of practical one, but it's one of social transformation in some way.
Thank you, Ben. We're coming toward the end of our session. Those of you who have been here for nearly 3 hours, I applaud, especially those on foreign time zones, especially those on far away foreign time zones. You know who you are. Kate, you have a comment.
Oh, just quickly, in response to this, to some of this most recent conversation, I'm thinking about, TJ, your comment about starting exploration of prototypes and experiments, and how we can make some of these ideas concrete, to use your word, Paul. And so something that appeals to me greatly about cybernetics, not just cybernetic concepts, to use your phrase, Eve, but cybernetics more generally speaking, is the forms that have emerged out of it, the forms that are experimental. That's something of interest to me because I'm looking at experimental arts practice and how these forms could be something different. So I think, and someone earlier mentioned the possibility of metaphor as producing change. And I believe very much in that. That's what has motivated a lot of my interest in this analogic versus digital framework. So perhaps this might be a conversation for the future. What forms or what media or what metaphors are we creating and making that might be productive in terms of being concrete in, not just discourse, not just showing something, but doing something. I haven't articulated that very well, but just discussing what forms are possibilities that could emerge.
Yes. So there's some things in the chat that are nucleating. One is around prior implementations. TJ and some others have talked about that, Ron, myself. What are the concrete examples that we have from the past? That's, again, a kind of sub activity of the NUMAC initiative. There may be others that come from this. What I would like to ask, for your indulgence in the next couple of minutes before we end, can those who have developed the slides do any final refinements between now and October 22nd? And you can go beyond a single slide if you wish. If you need to get in touch with others in your group, let us know, let me know, and we can connect you if there are specific names and others that you want to come to. I can be found at this address.
Maybe what I could do, I could just also put my email address, and
That's a
then
lovely idea, actually. If the facilitators for each group could do that.
Yes, and then if you want to
Claudia.
contact me with some more comments and ideas, please feel welcome to send me a note, and I will
Lovely idea.
include it in the slide.
Thank you, Claudia. That's a great idea. So if we could make those a little more firm by the 22nd, then we would send them out to everyone in this meeting to share. And also we are pointing toward November 2nd with the RSD 10 meeting. Peter Jones was here earlier. He's part of the RSD group relating, I can never remember, Ben always has to correct me, relating systems and design, something like that.
Yeah, relating systems and design.
Thank you.
And yeah, Ben
Eve is-
Sweeting's part of that too.
Yes, Eve is doing a session there. Fred Steyer is leading a session there. I'll be involved in a session there, some of which are relating to the topics of today.
Yeah, and Ben is too.
And Ben also, yes, thank you for that. And there's much to be done. And I can't sufficiently express, particularly in Larry's terms, without sufficient dynamics, I can't express my gratitude fully. But I appreciate all that you have brought here, and especially those behind the scenes who've worked so hard. Again, Adler, Eve, Eric, Claudia, Larry, Fred, others I'm sure I'm missing. Much appreciated. Ben has put the RSD 10 in the chat. Any last comments? I hope we can move to the concrete. Conversation is concrete in some ways. For those following the chat, you can see that, but it can be misconstrued. And I want to go beyond the accusation that, oh, that's just talk. I want to make things, do things, produce things, disseminate things. Any final comments?
Well, tomorrow there's another talk. Maybe you want to say that.
There is an ASC talk tomorrow in the same time at noon. I don't know if any of my colleagues has an invite handy. It would take me a minute to find it. I can try to find it. But it is another ASC event. Adler is just spectacular. He's right on top of it. And also before we go, we'll put some other links in the chat just so that you can reach us. You can get the compendium of links that I've put a couple of times there. Let me share my screen for one more moment. And if you go back to this slide deck, all of the underlined things are clickable links. And once more, we should probably put that in the chat. And that is this deck, the main presentation deck. I can give you that. Links upon links in a mad world of hyperlinking. Who would like to have the last word?
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone.
Thank you.
All the best. Please stay in touch.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you.
it. Here are some